Hello and welcome back to another Escape from Tarkov news. It's pretty bad news this time. It's like nerfs across the board for a lot of good stuff. So it's going to be a bit of a somber one. Let's get into it. First off, we have lowered recoil decrease on VAL and VSS base stocks, which I assume is a nerf to how much recoil they've got. I'm not sure why they did that. I don't feel like I'm running into everyone using a VAL, you know what I mean? They feel like they're in a good place. You know, every time I kill someone, they have a variety of weapons. Nerfing this weapon is just going to make people not use it as much, and I think that's, there's no point. People aren't overusing this weapon. I don't overly see it being used, so. Then we have the increase in accuracy on Glock Gratch P226. Again, it's a good buff, but nobody really uses pistols because the best armor penetrating rounds are too expensive. They are gotten too late in the wipe, and overall they just perform worse for the price of, if you go and get a Vepa 136 with a PS round, you're doing better than 90% of the pistols in the game. Up the penetration for 4.6 by 30 ammo. I think that is the MP7 ammo, which not sure why they needed to do that. The MP7 was very meta competitive. If you went on factory, chances are you'd find an MP7 being used, but time will tell if that becomes more prevalent in use. And then lowered accuracy of the Mosin barrels. This, I feel, is directly because there's certain large streamers just complaining about people using the Mosin and being able to buy an LPSGZH round and put them down. And I'm like, I'm sorry. That's the way Tarkov is. Tarkov doesn't forgive you if you are running about the map like a madman and you get one-tapped by someone with a Mosin who's, played it careful. For God's sake, it's a bolt action rifle. He doesn't have a follow-up shot. If he doesn't kill you in one shot, and you can't kill him and he gets a second shot, that's you. You're the bad player. The Mosin is a weapon designed to equalise the playing field for new players who come in to the game at this point in the wipe, and they can, they can't compete with the Tier 4s and the Tier 5 armour. They don't have access to it. Anyone between level 1 and 10 can come into this game, buy a Mosin, buy LPSGZH, and put someone down. And I think that is imperative to keep this game alive. To rob people of being able to do that. Now, this nerf might not be as big as that, but it's the general sentiment of big streamer complains who's running around, with 40 million in the bank or whatever he's got, arguing that this rifle should be less because he doesn't like getting killed by it. Play it a bit slower. You look at other streamers, it's very rare they get taken out by a Mosin. And they don't talk about it. So, I guess it just kind of irritated me with that one. It's like, I don't really use the Mosin, but I can see how other players, newer players, could use it as a crutch. And use that as an entry into Tarkov that allows them to spend a little bit of money and still be competitive in the, in a fight. But I think some people get too big, get too famous on this game, and they want to make the game the way they want it to be, and that's not the way games work. If you listen to the vocal minority of your game, you're gonna come out worse for it. And that turned into a little bit of a rant. I'm sorry about that. It's just a case of you have to go to the news, the news places for these things. You have to go to Reddit, you have to go to Twitter, you have to go and find these little things to make videos like this, and you just see a swarm of people complaining about the way the game is and trying to make it either easier for their particular playstyle or more difficult for a different one, and it's like, well, that's not very fair. Let the devs decide what the game should be, as long as those decisions are doing well, unlike the thick case change of last episode. But this picture is of the new customs expansion, and I'm excited for that because the reserve expansion that was just out was fantastic. It does need optimized because my frames on reserve has took a nosedive since it's been introduced, so they do need to go and optimize that map a bit more, but overall it was a good expansion. And now we get into the big issue with today's news, and that is the fact that almost all the trader prices across the board have been slashed. It's just going to make making money much harder in the long run, and whilst I understand why BSG is doing that, there's one or two reasons. One, they're slowing the pace of the game down, or two, they're trying to combat real money trading. In either situation, people not being able to make money in the middle of this wipe when other people have millions is only going to cause a rise in people likely to turn to real money trading. It's not going to fix that problem. I think this change needed to happen at the beginning of a wipe, not the middle of one, when some people already have a boatload of money. I have a load of money in my stash, and people who don't are just going to find it harder to compete in the game, so they're more likely to turn around and say, well, you know, this site's offering me 10 million rubles for $5. I'm going to take that. You know, like, that's the type of mentality you're forcing on people. Make these changes at the beginning of the wipe so everyone's on even footing. If this wipe's going to last another 2, 3, 4 months like last one did, you are literally just punishing people who didn't rush and make money at the beginning of the game, or if they took it slowly. You say it's not a race, but then you make these changes that make it a race. I know you're in beta and you want to test the game, but you're damaging the way the game plays for short-term results to see what would happen. And here's one Reddit post that's been sticky to outline how bad some of these changes are. Bitcoins are now down to 106,000 rubles. Fuel conditions have been slashed to 33% their value at 30,000. Magazine case has lost 33% of its value. And for some reason, crackers were selling at 85,000 rubles because, you know, they probably wanted to sell it for 8,500 rubles and missed a couple of zeros. But it's just a case of how far do you want to push? Like, I know the game's supposed to be becoming more difficult. I 100% agree with that. The game should be harder. It should be more difficult to make money and sustain good gear in raids. I don't have a problem with the game becoming more difficult. I have a problem with you flipping a switch, you as in BSG, flipping a switch and making it more difficult in the middle of a wipe cycle, which punishes the majority of players, very much like the thick case change, who don't, you know, that haven't rushed the game, haven't made it a race. And you quoted many times saying, it's not a race. It's not a race in the game to get to the end level. Fantastic. Don't then implement changes midway through the wipe that makes people think, well, I've got to get this done, else it's going to change. You know, you're struggling to come to terms with these two ideals of being in development, but you've still got hundreds of thousands of people playing on the regular. And if you make a decision that, well, for lack of a better, screws over those people who didn't take it as a race, didn't come in and play 8 hours a day for the entire, you know, since this game's been out, since this wipe's been up, you're just going to give them the wrong impression. You're giving them the impression that in order to make the most out of Escape from Tarkov, you need to come into the game and you need to go as fast as possible before you're going to go nerf something else. And it's just going to turn people away from playing the game. Now, someone did an in-depth analysis of all the changes, and that dude is Here You Go Man on Reddit, so thank you to him. You'll find this stickied on the top PSA comment on Reddit. And basically it just outlines, like, food sells to Jaeger for double what Therapist buys it for, Jaeger buys guns for more than Mechanic, Fence buys things for similar price to Jaeger, Armor goes for more to Ragman than Skier now, Therapist got massively nerfed. So just an easy breakdown: guns to Jaeger, meds to Jaeger, cosmetics to Jaeger, armor to Jaeger, backpacks to Jaeger, keys to Jaeger, ammo to Jaeger, food and drink to Jaeger, grenades to Prapo, fabric like paracords to Ragman, barter items to Ragman, containers to Therapist, attachments to Mechanic. So in other words, if you want to earn some dollars by selling to Peacekeeper, you know, sucks to be you. I don't see the reason behind this change. I really don't. Like, I don't understand why they would push a change like this in the middle of the wipe and think it makes total sense. You know, you've already got people that live on that cusp where they can run SVDs, they can run FALs, any gun they want. And then you're going to have the other end of the spectrum where people are struggling to run an AK-74. You know, and you've just made it so it's even harder for them to compare to the other guys on the other end. Overall, I think the game was in a fantastic place at the beginning of this wipe with the find and raid mechanics. I think it was in a really good place. I think you needed to combat the cheaters and the real money traders, and I'm not sure if all of these changes have been to combat that. or they're just your vision of the game. Either way, I think it's headed in a bad direction. To be perfectly honest, I think you're going to make it to the point where there's just going to be people who are used to playing Tarkov a certain way can no longer sustain that method of play, so they're just going to turn to other means. I'm sorry this turned into a bit of a rant video. I think it's just been a bad few days to be a Tarkov player, I'm going to be honest, between server issues, disconnects. If you're an NA player, you won't know what it's like on the EU servers right now, but on the EU servers, once it hits about 6 o'clock, if you're in a raid with gear, kiss it goodbye, because the server's just straight down. But I do think they're struggling to come to terms with two ideals. One of them is that the game is in development. The other is they've got hundreds of thousands of players playing right now. And we all progress at different rates through this game. And if you make changes mid-wipe to make the game closer to what your ideal vision of the game is, you've got to be prepared for some blowback, because that's going to punish people who haven't raced through the game. But tell me what you think down in the comments below. You know, overall, I like the changes, I just hate how and when they're implemented. But I want to know your opinion. What's your opinion on these changes, and what do you think BSG should do to make them a little bit less destructive for people who haven't already reached endgame, for example? I hope you've enjoyed this video. Again, I apologise for it being a little bit of a rant, and I'll see you next time.